We don't want to compete in the area of price, so we have to get and dig a little bit deeper in terms of what are the persistent pains, frustrations, challenges that these contractors, builders, developers are experiencing, and what is the ideal experience they would want to have when they're working with the subcontractors, countertop companies, through to the tile flooring cabinet companies. They really have no shortage if we talk about oversight.
Welcome to Verify in Field, the Millwork podcast. Your host, Jacob Edmond, CEO of Ductworks, will be interviewing experts in the industry to bring you insights and knowledge about the latest trends, techniques, and challenges in millwork. Whether you're a seasoned professional or just starting out, this podcast is for you. So sit back, relax, and join us as we explore the world of millwork. Here's Jacob.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome back to Verify in Field. And today I have a guest that I'm excited about, Justin Shaw, and he is the founder of Driven for Growth. And so today he's going to be talking and sharing his insights on how to land new accounts with contractors, builders, and developers. And he works particularly with countertop and cabinet industry company owners. So thanks for joining today, Justin.
Thank you for having me, man.
So to get started, I think it'd be good. Maybe you could just tell us a little bit about your background and your journey into specializing in the countertop and cabinet industry and what you do today.
Sure. So we would go back to 2018 is when I stumbled into the stone industry, and that led into other surfaces, cabinetry, flooring, tile, that they're so closely related. But in 2017, I was running my growth marketing agency. Also did a fair amount of consulting for operations and sales improvement. And we actually started working on the supply side, so working with a supplier of natural stone. But they had a sister company, it was a fabrication company, and so very quickly we started working on that side of the business. And we didn't think that we would really make that a focus. We had clients in a variety of industries, from medical device to financial. But after working in that industry for some time, countertop, and many of them also provided cabinets as well, some with flooring, started to get the sense that this was an underserved market in a number of different ways, whether technology, marketing strategies, and things of that nature. So we started to heavily focus and then went all in and niched down, and that made it our primary focus for the better part of 4 years. And it started off slowly with our first client and introducing us to their network. And once we decided that this was going to be a core focus for us, we met with a small group of them and asked, what we're thinking of doing this. We're thinking of planting our flag, in this industry to really try and serve. And we think they've experienced, developed some unique solutions, one of which we'll talk about today. And they said, yeah, they didn't recommend it actually, specifically for stone. They were like, are you sure you want to do that? I won't get into exactly why they discouraged me from it, but they said, if you are going to do that, we think that you need to solve more problems than what you're currently doing. Like, if you're focused primarily on growth marketing, there's a ton of marketing companies out there. And so we've got a lot of problems. And if you want to hear about them, we'll meet with you and we'll discuss them. And so we did, and we sat down with a small group and, it was virtually, but sat down and met with them and made a list of the main constraints and challenges they were facing, and then committed to, for a period of about a year, we said yes to the ones that we felt were in our wheelhouse, crossed off the ones that we just had no experience with, and worked complementary for those clients to solve those problems, to get their feedback, and essentially then really dialed down on things that we felt would be extremely valuable and help us to differentiate. And that led me on this journey of learning so much about the countertop industry, and then, getting my toe dipped into the millwork industry, and brought me to where we are today, which there's another step in that evolution we'll discuss in a little bit, probably.
Okay. So that ultimately necessity and kind of, you were already in growth marketing and stumbled upon this industry, and that was the need and kind of the gap that you saw is what inspired you found what you're doing today. Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct. That we thought we were getting some really great results, and we're offering some unique solutions in ways that others weren't doing, and our
Right.
clients were really happy. And so we thought that that would be a good place to start. And it was just like peeling an onion, though. Once you start to open up the can of worms of what they're really struggling with, right?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Are there any highlights, from your experience so far, working with companies in this industry?
Oh, sure. I mean, yeah, the highlights of you mean in terms of the challenges and constraints and ways to overcome, or
Yeah, I mean, obviously you saw a need, you saw a niche, you saw like, hey, I think there's a gap here that nobody else is filling, and I think we can fill that,
right?
But also, I imagine there's things that surprised you once you dove in and have now,
Oh, yeah.
had some years working. Is there anything that you found that stands out as very unique about doing the services you do specifically for stone and countertop and cabinets versus just growth marketing in general?
Sure. Yeah. I think it was the primary highlight that we found that we would continually bump up against, but in such a variety of ways, is that there's a lot of complexity. It can be. Some are doing very straightforward projects, um, just like cutting rectangles and very efficient and streamlined, and others that are doing custom, and it becomes very complex, highly skilled, and so a ton of oversight. And so while we were responsible for driving growth, there was just, when I talk about that onion and peeling it back, there was so many things that we would bump into that were constraints due to those complexities. And so prior to starting my growth marketing agency and many years ago, I had experience in operations on the like a director of ops side of things. And so I brought that in early on in consulting to combine with marketing, because I started to recognize if we were going to stay employed as an agency, I would have to, I felt I had to try and help solve these unique constraints because of all the complexity that you don't necessarily have in a lot of other industries. And these are small shops that often start from humble beginnings with, sometimes passed down generationally and inheriting outdated systems or haven't adapted in ways that other industries have.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm going to infer some things, and go a little off script here, but so it sounds like what you're describing is like, obviously you started in kind of growth marketing, which inherently assumes that, hey, there's already a stable business that's just like, hey, we need to bring more opportunity, more good customers to this machine we've built that provides a service or a product or something, right? But my guess is that as you started doing that with some of these stone and companies, it was started with, hey, let's do what we're good at, which is helping implement processes for growth marketing. But as you do that, you discover, oh wait, there's some other fundamental flaws or gaps in their business that if we flood them with new business, they're also going to fail or have other pain points
Exactly.
that rise up. And let's start helping with those processes, other parts of their business as well. Is that somewhat accurate?
Exactly. And that brought us to the full circle to where we are today, to take a holistic approach, because we recognized we kept putting the cart before the horse because it was out of scope. So we would just stick in our lane, and it was like pouring gasoline on a fire. So like, and often things would break, or it amplifies problems or exposes problems that weren't necessarily there before.
Because I think that's always an inherent kind of tension that maybe people aren't consciously aware of, because in larger businesses you have sales and you have operations, right?
Mm-hmm.
But when it's a smaller business, that's kind of like the owner maybe is all those things.
Yeah.
And so they're naturally, hey, I got to sell this and now I got to deliver this, and I'm able to control both. But as you grow, it's okay, we're going to apply effort. Hey, we need more business. Let's go sell.
Right.
And if you hire somebody that's their whole job to sell, but they don't have any control over the execution, they can't sell if you're not delivering the results of what they're selling, right? And it affects the next sale and so on and so forth. And so I think that inherent tension as a company grows, and as you apply, hey, let's go focus on marketing, let's go focus on new leads and opportunities, it starts to reveal other new bottlenecks or problems or gaps, right?
Totally. Yeah, absolutely. You nailed it.
So let's dive into your approach. Obviously, as you're engaging now with your customers, and specifically, you've niched down, you planted your flag, you said, "Hey, I'm going to go to this specific market that I see a need that, it maybe was advised that, hey, this isn't totally advisable, or if you're going to do it, you need to solve more problems than just growth marketing, right?"
Yeah.
But what is your approach to activating meaningful, profitable relationships with contractors and builders and your clients?
Sure. Yeah. To focus on that specifically, we are now at the point where so years ago, we provided that as a totally done for you service. So we had an in-house team that essentially did the front end of new business development and when I say small shops, some of them were, doing 10 million or more a year, but still, as the definition of a small business, we're still in that camp. And so more recently, we've moved to creating this to be formulaic. We've done it for long enough to create it to be formulaic, where we have members in a program that essentially are following our playbooks to execute this on their own. And we're finding that to be quite successful, because then they have full ownership of it. And one thing that has been really valuable in doing that is they value the opportunities more. Because when you're just handing them over to them, they often aren't treated the same. So that's just one thing I'll highlight, is that what I'll discuss is essentially the evolution of being able to create a formula that, when we dig into it today on the show here, that if people are following the steps, they should be able to implement this with a reasonable degree of success, if they're doing this on their own. So the first part about activating meaningful and profitable relationships at scale is identifying, the target market within all the customers that, a cabinet company or a countertop company serves, and looking at the segment that ideally offers the better margins, least amount of headaches, if we can find that sweet spot, and then look to identify what are the real problems that the segment of the market is experiencing. We don't want to compete in the area of price, so we have to get and dig a little bit deeper in terms of what are the persistent pains, frustrations, challenges that these contractors, builders, developers are experiencing, and what is the ideal experience they would want to have when they're working with the subcontractors, countertop companies, through to the tile flooring cabinet companies. They really have no shortage, if we talk about oversight, that they have to deal with in managing all of these different relationships and all the different logistics. So digging in deeply with the current customers that you serve, interviewing them is usually a good step. But sometimes they often will tell you what they think you want to hear. So you definitely want to dig deep and really uncover keep digging a little bit deeper and a little bit deeper, into those conversations, and speak with people throughout, the entire customer journey, you could say, or the life cycle of the project. So not necessarily just, the senior estimator that you might be trying to get a bid with or a project with, but all the way down, if you can start to uncover, well, what do, if they have their own installers, what are those people experiencing and dealing with? What are the frustrations of a site manager? And really what you're looking to uncover is, how can we represent the solution to this market? And so that's the first thing, is to really take the time to deeply understand. And then we would move into how to represent that solution. That's the first step.
So you mentioned something there, is that you don't like to kind of compete on price. Mm-hmm. And I imagine that means you don't like to work with your clients and trying, your goal is not to help them compete on price, meaning kind of chasing towards being the cheapest option, right, of the service they offer.
Right.
And what you're ultimately trying to uncover is, how can you help your customers communicate and offer value to justify the price they want to charge. Is that kind of accurate?
Yeah, that would definitely be one element. And in those sort of, like, if we think about like a multifamily project, it is going to be so price sensitive. So yes, that's always going to be a factor, but we want to differentiate. And when offering solutions, there are going to be those that only care about price. Yes, of course. And those are just those that are not going to move. But what we look to do is to understand that, okay, there's a percentage of the market, and that's who we would look to approach first, that are currently not satisfied with who they're currently working with. They have certain frustrations, challenges, the inefficiencies that are impacting their bottom line or potentially their reputation. But to move to work with somebody new represents risk to the unknown, learning curve, communication style. They just don't know. So if they're comparing something, prices, even if you are going to come in a little cheaper, may not move them because there are all those other factors that you have to overcome in that friction. So the ability to represent a solution allows you to ideally put yourself in a category of one. So it's when you don't want to just be in, on the bid list and then just churning through those and just, maybe you land a few. You're looking for a select percentage of the market that values truly what you have to offer and solve for, that will raise their hand when you're getting in touch with them, give you a project, to test out and see if you could actually walk the walk, and then start to give you more work. So we want to be apples to oranges versus apples to apples, because only one company in a market can, win in the game of price.
Right. So basically, how can you work with your customers to figure out from their customers what is that true competitive advantage? What is it that they can offer that makes them unique and says, hey, we're not just because if you're offering the same thing as your competitors, and like you said, you're in a bid list that says, hey, these are the 5 stone companies or cabinet companies that are qualified to bid this. And that GC is basically just looking to say, hey, are they all apples to apples? And then pick the cheapest one. You want to get out of that race altogether and say, hey, we're the only one offering this. This is what you want to get with us. And oh, by the way, this is our price. Yes, it's competitive, but you're only going to get this from us.
Correct.
How do you help your clients identify those unique strengths? You mentioned, understanding from their customers, hey, what are their pain points? How can we help? And how do you work with your clients to identify those and then leverage them to stand out?
Yeah, it's in the early days, over many sessions. So it would usually take us up to 3, 90-minute sessions to dig deep with them. Often, for a variety of reasons, they weren't able to interview, and when they did, it didn't necessarily yield the information that we were looking for. And so, we're making assumptions, based on, working with our clients through those sessions. Okay, what do you think that from feedback you've gotten, when you're participating in that whole, thing that we hear about active listening, but if we've been active listening over time, what have they told us? And we'll dig a little deeper and I can give some examples, but what we usually will typically do is move quickly then to go, okay, based on these, and largely I do think that often they're assumptions, but when we've worked in the space long enough, we have a general sense of what a lot of general contractors, developers, and builders are dealing with, right? So we're able to bring to the table for them a lot of the commonalities that are shared across the board. But then you want to go to market and test. Sorry. Yeah.
You said you have multiple meetings, and early on, a lot of times it didn't necessarily yield. I imagine. Do you often have a first meeting with a client and say, okay, let's work through and see if we can extract from you what your unique advantages are? And I would imagine almost every one of your clients, the first meeting is something like, well, we have the best quality, or we meet our schedules.
Yes.
We have the most value that you're saying. You're after that saying, the last 10 competitors of yours said the exact same thing, so you're not unique.
Oh, yeah.
Does that happen a lot?
Yeah, we stopped asking that question. That was like on day one, like the first few clients that we helped in that. And then we learned very quickly, let's not ask, let's ask other probing questions. Because yes, exactly. It was 10 years in business, family owned and operated, or veteran owned. The highest quality, fastest turnaround time, most competitive price. And so now we just preface that. So like at the beginning with the onboarding in those sessions, we let them know that we're willing to bet, having done this as long as we have, and we specialized in this for 4+ years as a managed service. So we would let them know if they were to go to 5 of their competitors and look on the website, they're all saying more or less the same thing, right? They're all saying the same thing. there's no true differentiation. And at this time, skepticism is at an all-time high. Trust is hard to come by and needs to be earned. And so even in those cases, we would probe further to what quality means. Specificity is really important. You can't just kind of blanket statement quality. It's like, okay, well, what is the proven process that you follow to be able to say that you have high quality, and like get really specific and point to those things. So yes, over many sessions we would uncover that, and we're really probing into getting past the things that they would say. Well, our clients would complain about poor communication. So as you've talked about, like they would give us the same information. Poor communication, missed deadlines, budget overruns, the job site being left a mess, not professional, all the way down the line. And we're like, okay, so now we preface with that stuff too. All the complaints that a contractor builder might have, frustrations. And then, so once we set that and they're like, oh, you said everything, now it's time to go deeper.
Do you ever find a competitive advantage is where a company is located? Because I feel like, especially in the U.S. at least, and maybe even in Canada, but this is something that in the cabinet industry and millwork industry, I think people are scared. Like everyone wants to say, "Hey, we can do a job anywhere. We're located in Minnesota, but we can install anywhere." But that's not your competitive advantage because everybody else may be willing to do that. But 90% of your business is in, the Twin Cities, for example, and you're actually strategically located in a hotbed of certain type of businesses that's there. That those GCs that are there, it's going to be harder for somebody outside the city to come in, and you can say, hey, look, we're here. We can come to the job site tomorrow. If you have a missed thing, whatever, like we're right here. I think a lot of times companies are kind of afraid to actually leverage what is their competitive advantage because they feel like it makes them too niched. I mean, like you, even in your business, you planted a flag in a niche, and a lot of times people want to be kind of a jack of all trades. Hey, we don't want to lose an opportunity by being too narrow.
Totally.
Like, do you ever have that dichotomy where you're trying to help a client make a decision of like, hey, yes, you can do this, but you're not making money on these jobs over here. And if you really just committed to this is what we're good at, is that ever a part of what you're helping clients through?
Yeah, absolutely. I think with the first question, in terms of proximity and like service radius, that's a tricky one. Tricky from the standpoint that conversely, as somebody else's competitive advantage is that they're totally out of state, but can drop ship in containers, unbeatable prices because they're prefab, and have stacked the competitive advantage to be able to come in where they can facilitate those and have subcontracting crews on the ground in those areas. And you're also bumping up against other competitors that are 2.5 miles away from you. And so, or new market entrants. So for that one, I try to dissuade people from seeing that as competitive advantage because it's not defensible. It's easily disrupted. And we want to have something that there's longevity in where you plant your flag and you can continue to innovate. So you deepen where you've planted your flag, continue to innovate, continue to improve, unlock the next solution that you solve for, which is not something that everybody's going to want to do. We've gotten pretty deep on this conversation, want to apply this to smaller shops that you might solve a very simple problem in just text message updating people if there's a change, when a change order is complete that nobody else is doing. It's like super simple, but you're a small shop, 3-man, crew or 3-person crew, I should say. And then, you're in an area where you've got a good foothold and a lot of referral traffic and you want to kind of land another 2 to 3 accounts. We're getting pretty deep on stuff to secure, 7-figure projects and what we're talking about, but I also want to not, leave out those and still provide things that are applicable there. In terms of just answering the last part of your question there, in terms of niching down, yes, I do really try to encourage them to look at, we're going after a very small percentage of the market that we're very well positioned for. And it doesn't mean that you're not going to accept other types of work, but the messaging that we're putting out in the marketplace through marketing, advertising, promotion, marketing is a competition for attention. And ultimately what we're trying to do is have the audience memorize what they recall that we're associated with. You have this problem, there's this X solution. And so it's very important to just speak to that one very small segment. And as a result, you'll still attract others. So I think that it's good for people to not feel like they're going to lose out on other people as a result of doing that. And they can be selective from there.
Yeah. So can you talk a little bit about those strategies, those tactics, as you're working with your clients on specifically generating opportunities with prospective customers? What are the strategies or tactics that you recommend or that you help your clients with?
Sure. So over the years, we've added on an element of digital marketing. Again, we no longer provide this as a service at this point, but what I'll share with you is heavily just on one aspect, which is new business development through cold outreach through email. Is what can be done and scaled for busy shop owners that need something that there's a system in place to do a lot of the heavy lifting when they're doing 100 other things. There are other ways to move the needle. We've tried all that we could think of. So direct mail, phone call, picking up the old, number one, the phone, social media and digital marketing, which does help as well. But the thing that we found to work the best is reaching out to somebody via email, better than LinkedIn or any other channel. And I think the reason for that is all of those channels are disruptive in this application, right? Nobody asked us to reach out and knock on their door. And in those other channels, it's hard to get, except for social media advertising, it's hard to be able to convey your message quickly, clearly, and be able to control, for lack of a better way of putting it, the communication of that. If you pick up the phone and call somebody, it's hard to control that conversation because we shouldn't be pitching right away, and that we should be getting to know them. And often the contractor will control the conversation. It'll be very abrupt, very quick, and they won't have a chance to really demonstrate why they have something unique to offer. So email is the method that we've used for 4 years, and now we have our clients set up the same systems, and we would do it manually. So we have a team that would reach out manually and high level of personalization. But for the average shop, we need to create it to be a systemized, formulaic, and heavily automated so that they're using campaigns that essentially present their competitive advantage and why this matters to the audience, and having that run on an automated basis.
So email is the primary channel that you start with in recommending.
100%.
Is that new for most of your clients?
Not necessarily. A lot of them, in the early days, and now I think in the stone industry, it's such a small industry, countertops and cabinets as well. We've seen that we've helped to educate the industry a little bit, and that like a lot has changed. It's become a lot more savvy. But it used to be like, oh, do you mean that you'll use Constant Contact or, a MailChimp and we're going to send a newsletter out? And so we would have to educate on that. These are really as if you opened up Gmail or Outlook and you're writing an email, and you're hitting send, right? It's highly personalized and sent to the key decision maker, just at scale is the key. So it's once we get over that hurdle of them understanding what the mechanism is there, then usually there's doubt, or they're just like, oh, that won't work. We've tried that. Our sales reps have tried that. And my answer to them on that is usually, well, it's an art and science. Copywriting is an art form. Just like countertops and cabinets, there's cutting rectangles, and then there's an art form to the other stuff, right? And so it's an art form, and then the competitive advantage is everything. That's what unlocks somebody actually responding. And when you put those two things together, and then the last element is consistency and persistence. So when shop owners are super busy and doing a million things, they might have tried something, but did you do it day in and day out, 5 days a week, year after year? And that's nearly impossible unless you have an in-house person just focusing on this.
That consistency piece, I think, is probably a big obstacle, because I think in practice, a lot of companies who haven't put any kind of concerted effort behind this in the past, inherently, your kind of legacy-wise is a very relationship-driven business, right? Yeah. But it's more a lot of times like there's an owner that has the relationships.
Yes.
And that's their kind of only mechanism to turn up or down sales. It's like, oh, well, I'm going to reach out to my existing network and I'm going to say, hey, do you have work? Hey, can we do whatever?
Right.
But there isn't that consistency of, let me nurture, let me be in the marketplace, let me post on social media, let me be there. Even if they don't need me now, they may need me later.
Right.
And I think a lot of times people try to turn it up and say, we need sales now, so what can I do today to get sales tomorrow?
Yes.
And at that point, it's too late to have an impact tomorrow, usually.
Yeah, and it also feels
agree?
a little icky, right? When it's like, and that's something we saw early on, when they were like, oh yeah, we're doing that. And we reach out and we're really just seeing if they have anything in the pipeline. And it's like, you're just reaching out for what's in it for you. We need to be reaching out for what's in it for them. And yes, you're right. By that time, it's too late. There's sort of a 30, 90-day rule we apply. It's like what you're doing this month. So we're in June right now, 2024. The actions and activities that are taken today will show up in the pipeline in about 90 days. So if you're in that feast and famine mode that you've gotten projects and you're busy and the foot comes off the pedal for new business development or marketing activities, sales activities, then it'll be crickets in 90 days. So consistently having an evergreen approach is really important. The other thing I'll touch on that just came to mind as you were mentioning some of those things is the other thing that we often hear, and so I just want to mention that to people that are listening, is we'll talk to countertop cabinet company owner that's like, well, I grew up here, born and raised, like this is my dad's business. Like we know, I'm in the truck, I'm driving around, I know all of the contractors, by name, run into them, shake hands, and knows who we are. And what we found time and time again is that the total addressable market is, significantly higher than people realize. Once you get into, and that's the other part of the equation we haven't talked about, is the prospect database building of your total addressable market, or your TAM. And that's an important part of it, really spending that time to do the research. And we have gotten that down to formulaic and a playbook that people can follow, and they can use a managed service to do that for them. So we don't do that anymore because it was very labor intensive. And now there's sort of a press easy button. Everybody wants an easy button. That's one of them. There kind of is one. So they can press the easy button, but I think most will be surprised at just how many opportunities are out there.
Also, and this is probably outside the scope of what you do, maybe not, but I think anecdotally, that is very common. Hey, we know the people, but like you said, that's usually a narrower pool than they realize they could be addressing. But also those relationships, a lot of times I infer, and this is conjecture, that I think a lot of times are holding them back from profitability, from success, because it's like, hey, I know this client, I'm going to give him a good deal. We have a good relationship, as opposed to, am I getting the best? Am I actually charging the value that we're offering, or am I just, and a lot of times I find this in sales, a lot of times it's like, oh yeah, we're doing this job, and because there's all this carrot at the end of the line that never amounts to anything. I mean, I can't tell you how many times a sales guy has told me, yeah, we're going to get this job and they've got so much more work for us. And the next job, we got this job and they're going to get so much more work for us. And we keep giving like deals. And so one, you're probably not charging what you could be because you've got a great relationship and you want to maintain that relationship. And really it's one way, one-sided. Right. And two, maybe you could be updating your prices and you don't realize the value you're offering because you're not going outside of that same pool of clients you've always worked with. You have those relationships with. Totally. And so a lot of times you might be surprised when you go outside of that and find a new client that's like, holy crap, I didn't know you guys exist and you guys are great. And they're actually, willing to pay more than what you're charging your other clients because those are legacy prices, legacy relationships that are just used to calling in favors constantly. Totally. I don't know if that ever comes up in your scope, but I think a lot of times people are held back by sitting in the same circles and the same clients and the same cycles and the same relationships. Oh, it comes up very frequently. Yeah, you have the legacy clients that still have the owner's phone number. Now the owner has a whole team, but they still call him and they need something next week, right? It's like, need something next week and for less, right? And hard to, like I was talking to one of our program members a week and a half ago about that. And it was just in passing. He was just mentioning, it was like, oh, sorry, I was late for a call, or whatever it was, because of this. And we just had a chuckle about it because he's like, he told them no, which is great.
but he's like, when will that change, right? And it's tricky because those people have helped you to get to where you are today. Right? So you really want to value those relationships. But I think the key here is diversification. We use the term roster. It just is kind of an easy one to think about, that the accounts that you have on the B2B side, not the retail homeowner side, but just kind of look at it like your roster. There is some math that we put behind that nobody should represent more than X percentage of your overall gross revenue, but easier said than done at the beginning. And you don't necessarily want to come to them and say, hey, we're increasing prices, which hopefully people are exploring, with margins being squeezed right now more and more and more. But it's easier to do when you have more of a leg to stand on. You feel more confident because you've gotten 3 more new accounts on your roster. And you're a little more diversified, where somebody says no, you can redirect their business elsewhere if necessary. And then usually they will accommodate. They don't want to go somewhere new, like we've talked about the risk and learning curve and all of that stuff. So they're going to say yes, more than likely, if you're delivering the expectations that they want, which if you've had them for years, most likely that's the case.
So you talked about your program. What is your program today? Can you talk a little bit about, if clients are interested in everything you're saying, Justin, hey, this sounds great. I want in. How can Justin Shaw help my business? Can you talk a little bit about what that looks like today?
Sure. So the evolution from 2017 up until more recently is that there was always an element of consulting in the growth marketing, and we had clients that were with us, and still with us for 7 years since that time. That when we took a holistic approach, when we were working with them to not just go for growth and not do it in spite of everything else, that they had the most success. When we were working with them, providing consulting and coaching, that they were able to have sustainable success and not 2 steps forward and 1 step back, or worse, 1 step forward and 2 steps back, right? And sort of trapped on this roller coaster of which the entrepreneurial journey and growing our businesses is not linear like we want it to be, like straight up. It's also not like usually like a hockey stick. It's usually like up a little bit, then down, and like wee, and then back, and like, oh crap, like, there is that. But we ideally don't want it to be, something that's detrimental to the business. And so essentially we've evolved this to move from services to essentially a hybrid training and coaching program. So essentially what we've recognized over time is that business owner, even up to like a 10 million, and talking to some shops, 25 million, the owner can still often be the number one constraint in the business. And so we were finding that in order to be successful, we've essentially taken the time to reverse engineer all the successful case studies, the commonalities over the last 7 years. I got into the lab, you could say. I reversed engineered everything and put everything into workbooks, playbooks, and recorded step by step, essentially how people can build a sustainable foundation for their business. The new business development element is part of it, but as we spoke about in the beginning, we no longer want companies to put the cart before the horse. So we take a very holistic approach to help them build a foundation for their business. And something that always comes to mind is a quote that I heard, that you can't fire a cannon from a canoe. So it's like, in order to aim and strive for growth, we need to have a really solid foundation in place. And so we essentially start all of our engagements with clients now in our 90-day growth engine program. And so that really sets the foundation, but new business development is part of it. We've learned that, still it's like there's a need to fill extra capacity, or we want to grow yesterday. So we're like, okay, yes, but, or yes, and, and we need to ensure that there's a solid infrastructure in place so that as we increase opportunities, that we have scalable operations in place, and we have also systems in place to ensure quality and customer experience remain either at the same level or continue to improve.
Right.
Awesome.
Yeah. So, before we wrap up, there's a couple questions I like to ask every guest,
Sure.
and I'm curious your perspective on these. And these are we talked at the beginning. It's going to be challenging questions. I'm interested to see your perspective, though. So, one, what changes do you anticipate in the countertop and cabinet industry over the next 5 to 10 years, particularly concerning business growth strategies and kind of everything we talked about?
Yeah, business growth strategies. I think that in 5 to 10 years, that was a tough one when I was trying to think about that because in the last, like, it feels like 6 months, it's probably been 9 months that, like, with things like ChatGPT and AI, things are moving so quickly and evolving so quickly that it's hard to forecast what will be the changes from a technology standpoint. What is going to be the change in like the global marketplace for talent, even supply chains, all of those types of things. But if we get down to growth and how to drive growth, I think that one of the things that even when we were talking about email, it's we chose that channel because you can own that channel. You can't necessarily, like, the Facebook algorithm will just change next week and your campaigns stop working. You can always deliver email. You can always pick up the phone. You can always deliver mail. And where I'm going with that is essentially the principles of sales, marketing, new business development, and growth are timeless in a way, regardless of how the landscape shifts in an industry, regardless of how more competitive it's going to be. Those are the things that are going to be quite challenging with skilled labor currently, the ability for offshore companies to, fabricate at volume at prices that local providers can't compete with. Like, there's going to be a lot of things that are challenging there. However, I truly do believe that the thing that we talked about today and having a competitive advantage, like figuring out the problems that you solve and how to continue to innovate in those areas. If you do that, and then you don't chase shiny objects because the channels might change, right? So there might be in 10 years, I don't foresee, we'll be the dinosaurs that still use Facebook. It'll be like the really outdated, platform, right? There'll be something else, but the channels don't matter so much as the ability to communicate a message clearly, and that matters to somebody and compete for that attention. So I think that those are the things that need to be focused on. And so it's really getting back to the fundamentals and mastering those.
That was going to be my next question that you kind of answered, is the core aspects of your approach or values that you think will remain constant despite the evolving trends. It sounds like, being able to communicate effectively, your value, the problems you solve, regardless of the channel. Is there anything else you would say that will always remain constant despite the trends, the channels that change, and things like that?
For us, or for when you were...
Yeah, for as if you look 5 to 10 years out, driven for growth, you guys' core approach.
Oh, sure, yeah.
What do you think will remain constant despite changes in the industry and trends and things like that?
Yeah, with how we approach things and sort of our mission. So just to kind of give a little bit more context, up until December of last year, no, even more recently, but essentially for the last 7 years, our brand was Stone Fabricator Elite. That was our business name and what we operated under. Once we made the move to a hybrid training and coaching, I didn't know what our brand DNA and our was and what our identity would be. And so we still sort of operated under SFE, Stone Fabricator Elite, and we built what we just called the Academy. It was just a placeholder. I was like, I don't know what to call this. We have a group. We have all of the training resources and support. We'll just call it the Academy till we really arrive at the place where we've distilled down what our core values are and how that overlaps with what the core values of our members and clients are. And it was only up until recently that we rebranded under Driven for Growth, and our tagline is "We are relentless." In our experience, the entrepreneurial journey of a driven, ambitious stone shop or cabinet, shop owner is bumpy, to say the least. It can be. It is hard. It can be lonely. Some that might be listening to this can relate to that. They might be seeing others in the industry that seem to just have success and growth, and whatever they touch turns to gold. For others, it can be quite an arduous journey. Those are really those that we are looking to support. And so Driven for Growth, the core value is being that we find that number one is a mindset and culture, and that's a whole separate conversation, but often one that's challenging to see in an organization that people adopt. Having driven, team members that adopt a culture for growth and take ownership over outcomes, and it's not just the owner that's on an island by themselves. So that is what, transpired for us, to create that. And the values for us is to have a relentless nature to succeed. That's where we want to serve, to help our clients to continue to have that, because it's easy to lose that, to one day want to be like, I just want to sell the business, I'm going to go get a job. That comes up, often. Right. And so we're here to serve them and support them in that, in a very holistic sense, to ultimately go from where many are in this, we call it survival stage. It's like, startup, survival, successful, scaling, and sustainable. Our mission is to help people get to building a sustainable business. And so I think that regardless of what comes, regardless of what changes over the years, that's our mission over the next 10 years, is to help 100 business owners and their companies to reach the sustainable level. And the reason for that is one of our core values is to impact communities, at the community level. And we donate as a business, but we can only donate so much. And so we feel that if all of our clients have that as a value as well, the core value, that they want to give back and make an impact in their local community. So we see that as a multiplier. If we help 100 companies, support their families, their teams' families, and then the community at large, we're looking at 10,000 lives impacted significantly. So that's the mission that we're on, and nothing should kind of deviate us from that course over the next 10 years.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, for anyone that's interested in reaching out and finding out more about Driven for Growth, Justin Shaw, how can we work together? What's the best way for them to do that?
Best way to do that, you can find our website at justinxshaw.com. That's because without the X was taken. And so we put the X in there because it's a multiplier, represents multiplying and growth, and also solving for the unknown, which is something we help for. So justinxshaw.com is where people can find us.
Okay, awesome. We'll share the link in the show notes. And I really appreciate you coming on and sharing your advice, sharing your story, and talking about what you guys are doing at Driven for Growth. So we will put that link in the show notes for anybody to reach out directly. Awesome. And hopefully get your help to drive their growth.
Really appreciate your time, Jacob. Thank you so much, man.
Thanks, Justin.
Thank you for listening to today's episode. Do you want to stay up to date about industry insights, new content, and our community of millworkers? Go to ductworksmw.com to sign up for our newsletter. I'll see you in the next episode of Verify in Field.